Heather, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm gonna film you if that's okay.
Please, that'd be great.
And then if anybody couldn't come, so I'm just gonna try to see if I can get
Okay.
you and
Cool.
your slides.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you flip through it?
I
Did
did.
it look all right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not a ton of slides, but I'm sure there'll be lots of questions.
Oh yeah. I'm coming. I'm gonna come.
Okay, good.
But I just have to get in here and make sure you're in frame.
Look, you don't even need me. Did Heather already come through here?
She did. She was looking for a way to record.
She's in there.
Oh, she's in the closet. There you go.
Are you going to stay at the podium? Are you comfortable with that, staying at the podium?
I think I will, yes.
Okay.
Yep. I won't wander too much. I know, I got yelled at last time.
I just zoomed you in and we've got, I mean, that's in the way a little bit, but it'll be fine.
Where's the, oh, that's the camera there. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. All right, so I'm gonna go finish scheduling it. You are
Good.
11, right? 11.
You're going to play time.
11. All right, I'm gonna go do that and then come back. I'm excited.
And I'll bring you a bottle of water. Do you need anything else?
great.
Anything
A
else?
beer, IPA.
Oh, yes. She like my pajamas.
Notice I didn't offer one.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Pete that I work with, his son who's in high school, just had his done 2 weeks ago. He's fully recovered now. So it is something that some kids, Joey and Bella, had to deal with, but it's not something to be scared of if you ever had to. What's that?
Oh, right there.
Say that again, bud? Oh, did quit. Oh, interesting. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, well, just wanted to check in. So hopefully you're starting to feel better once you get that antibiotic in you. Yeah, kind of, but they just do it right through your mouth. They give you medicine, so you take a nap while they're doing it. And yeah. What's that? Yeah. I can't understand what you're saying, Kelly. Okay. Okay. All right. I love you guys. Can't see it.
Hello.
Not today, no.
Where would you like to sit?
I don't know, what would you like to say?
I want to sit I don't know if I'll be able to hear, but we'll find out.
Yeah. I'm supposed to have lots of questions to ask, but I don't have them.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are you the famous Rob?
That's me.
Shannon Stott, how
Nice
are
to meet
you?
you.
Hi.
We should have a fun presentation, well, informative, put it that way. We'll try to make it fun.
Hope so. Yeah. I am one of, not, obviously Heather got you here, but
Yep.
I'm on the environmental committee.
Oh, wonderful.
So we were sort of curious.
Good. Yeah, lots of aspects of the project that we'll talk about with an emphasis on geothermal and
Good.
photovoltaics. Yeah. Now, and I'll preface this for the whole group. I'm not the engineer, I'm the owner's rep. I am technically a licensed architect. I know enough to speak to these things. I'm not the expert. So it should be good.
We watched the last town council thing on YouTube, and we
Yep.
saw you at work. Saw you at work too. You made us.
That's right.
I went there, yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
I expect to go there the next time too.
It's-
Not to talk, but just to know what's going on.
Yeah, it's like the end of May.
May 23rd.
23rd.
Yeah, it's an interesting group. I've got to imagine it's difficult for the commissioners. That was just their second hearing back in person since COVID started. Everything's been virtual.
Oh, really?
So I can imagine with the project, with so many neighbors coming out, they were definitely feeling the pressure. But
The neighbors were a little hostile.
Just,
it's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
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 Were you here when the commissioner and one of his membership toured Doncaster?
I was, yep, Kelly and I gave them that tour.
Yeah. Kelly said, at first they were a bit uptight, but then it kind of loosened up and
Yeah.
they were quite impressed.
Yeah.
So
It was a very encouraging tour, asked lots of good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very fun.
So you're working on the renovation as well.
I am, yep.
What do you call it, legacy?
This is the Legacy Campus. The expansion is called the East Campus.
For now, there are some naming
Naming
potential
contest?
opportunities that are being discussed.
Oh, okay.
Highly confidential at the moment.
Okay.
Sort of like where the money is?
Not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily.
Yeah. Well, for here, lots of naming opportunities
Right.
for renovated spaces or the expansion, plus an emphasis on that. Yeah, it's gonna be great. Flip through this one more time, make sure I don't forget something.
How we get an audience?
And
How we get an audience?
you know Doncaster, they always come at the last minute.
I haven't learned that. I keep pushing Arthur to come, 10 minutes early.
Well, it depends what, some things they come early for. If there's a lot of
Seats.
people on the stage, they come early
Right, so they
to
can hear.
get seats so they can see.
Generally, the first row is taken up by tradition with those who have walkers.
Uh-huh. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You always get, she gets me early.
Early.
I'm an on-time person. I arrive everywhere right on time, within a minute.
I try to be on time. Every once in a while, I don't make it.
I'm always 10 minutes early. She's,
Yes, I was pushing.
she always is pushing to get there, get there.
Hello. That's a rare occasion to see you in meetings.
See, there we go. People are
Hello.
Occasionally.
You're still working. Hey, Heidi over there. Hello.
Did everybody go and do their shredding?
hand shredded it myself.
I always play the voicemails before he's like focused in the morning.
Trying to see, to get this out.
So he misses half the news.
Oh, okay. Learn something new.
Learn something,
Structure your brain in a different direction. Anyhow. All I know is they dig you down. Well, I know that. But I forgot what I know. And then when they get down there, what do? They get heat. Hopefully. I keep wondering, when they do this, if they ever run into any old bodies or any old stuff.
Probably. Once in a
I think so, right? Anyhow, we'll see.
We will.
I figured I could learn something that I didn't know anything about Good Morning.
You know about Good Morning?
No, I know about Good Morning. I don't know about this stuff.
Oh, wait till you.
Well, you'll be an expert by the end.
I'm sure. Yay!
It's okay.
I'm wondering if you ever find anything really
How are
good.
you?
What's that?
I'm wondering if you ever find anything really good, like buried money or whatever. Dead bodies.
Can't tell you about those, no. I haven't experienced anything on any of my projects, but my brother-in-law is a civil engineer down in Pennsylvania. He's working on a new highway area where two primary rivers come together.
Yeah,
And they had to go in and get an archaeologist to start digging up, and they've been finding a wealth of artifacts. And he just texted me a picture of
that would be
that.
great fun.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. But they found something that was some sort of grinding, they called it grinding stone, but said it could have actually been a dinosaur bone. It was the most bizarre shape, this white thing, and he said, it looks like there were scrapings on it, but it like, tested for thousands of years old. Pretty amazing.
So are the archaeologists in there with them?
Yeah, yep, so they have to hire him.
Because,
I
you
mean,
know,
basically, even our project for the expansion, there is a DEP requires, kind of, they call it phase one, so they just look at mapping and say, is there any chance that there could be things underground here that we may want to investigate? So they're going through that process now, but that happens on any project near wetlands.
yeah.
This one, they knew that there was a pretty rich history of Native Americans there, so
Yeah,
it's pretty wild.
okay, that's fun to find stuff.
Yeah. It slows down the construction project a little bit, but,
I know,
you know, in the
never
scheme
mind,
of things.
it's fun.
That's right.
It keeps you want to keep going to see what else is out
Right,
there.
I know.
Very good.
Try to avoid the jam up at 6 o'clock.
Oh, boy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
I said the orders come in. Oh, trying to space out the reservations. I should tell you what I forgot on Carol.
Austin.
Austin, yes, you're new.
Yes.
And you live
See, you never know what you'll find. That would be exciting.
Very nice.
different dishwasher. An unusual dishwasher, unless you change.
No, it's an unusual dishwasher. My wife complains frequently about it. It's intended for an RV,
Oh, right.
and it's small for a reason.
No, it's going to work. You just run it around a big building, but it's also
Or
supposed to.
use paper plates.
Oh, that's built.
Well, I suppose it's how much they like.
I guess.
You know, they'll find it out for any one day to the next. Well, that's
That's one way of looking at it.
That's one way of looking at it.
Again, for another reason.
You're right. Well, bring it up.
Oh, thank you.
He's such a good guy. Yeah. I saw that his truck was. Yeah. You got to sit in the audience. You got to sit in the audience. He's on too.
Hello.
No, you're fine. You're perfect.
$10.58.
They haven't so far. I don't want to see it on my mom's bill. I saved up enough for it. Yeah, so when I button all pens, make sure. It makes a difference. Right.
Safety warrant to the hospital.
Because it's not reflected in my bills because I can tell. I could tell, I kept track of it, I made sure I said all my. But, they haven't subtracted these. I couldn't find it.
It's quiet.
Interesting, but
That's the
and see,
Bring in some cattle.
Yep.
Scoping out for extra people.
Did you guys need to like hit the button in the closet or anything to record?
I think we're good.
All right,
I think
okay.
she got it, she has it going.
Okay.
I think this lighting is good because they can still see you, but it got
Yeah,
clear.
that's good.
We have one more. Oh, there we are. See if we have any stragglers.
Okay.
All right. Got one straggler coming.
All good. Yeah.
There he is. I'll shut the back. I'll shut the front door and I'll leave like one open in the back for stragglers.
Okay.
All right. Are we ready? Are we ready to learn about geothermal?
Yes.
All right. I say let's get going. I see a lot of notebooks. People are taking notes.
That's good.
There's not going to be a quiz, but you're welcome to take notes. All right. Well, we're very, very lucky to have this presentation on the last day of Earth Month. Right, Janet?
Yes.
As we're calling it, and this is like the perfect presentation to learn about geothermal. So here is Rob from One Point. Ready? Here we go.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm very happy to be with you here this morning. My name is Rob Beal. I'm with One Point Partners. We are the owner's representative and project manager for the expansion work as well as the additions and renovations to this building. So we're the ones we're working with all the consultants, making sure things are moving according to schedule and kind of coordinating with everybody. So very excited to be here to share some of the sustainable aspects of the project. We'll definitely do an emphasis on geothermal and we'll talk about some other areas. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer as many as I know. I will tell you what I don't know, and we'll certainly follow up, and I can work through Heather to get you answers. But I am not an engineer by training. I'm a licensed architect. Now I'm on the owner's rep side of the world, so we actually hire architects and engineers to do the project. But I know enough about this system to be able to present it and hopefully give you enough information to ask some questions, and then we can follow up if needed. Okay? Great. So just real quick, a few of the items that we're going to touch on today. I will just quickly go over the project team, so who those professionals are that we work with. We'll start with the geothermal systems. We'll talk about photovoltaics and where we're planning to add solar panels to the project. We'll talk about just some general sustainability components to both the building design as well as the site design. All right. Okay, but let's start with the project team. So a lot of these names you've probably heard or you've seen folks coming in for design meetings. So RLPS Architects in the top left corner, they are the architectural firm working on the project. They are a nationally recognized firm in the United States, and they specialize in senior living projects. So they really know and work with the best consultants to make sure that these spaces are designed appropriately and, thermally, the comfort, everything is where it needs to be. So Reese Hackman, directly underneath them, they are engineers, so they're mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineers. They also specialize in this specific industry, so they're definitely the team members we want at the table. Fuston O'Neill is our local civil engineer, so they're doing both civil and landscape. If you've watched any of the recent approvals, you would have seen Lauren Mello doing a lot of the presentation with her team. And then C.E. Floyd. C.E. Floyd is the construction manager that we're working with. So they're doing a lot of work during pre-construction to help us planning the project, but then we're also doing some testing that we'll talk about. You probably saw the equipment over on the expansion site that we were drilling, and I'll give you some background, what we were trying to figure out, why we were doing, and how it's going to help us moving forward. But C.E. Floyd was a great partner in coordinating all that with the subcontractors, which is a great kind of a starting point for the project. Okay, so like I said, let's start with geothermal. I know that's kind of the topic that everyone is most interested in. It's a very exciting part of the project. Before we talk about project specifics, let's just talk about conceptually what is geothermal and what does it mean. So geothermal is a type of technology that's been around since the 40s. It did start to get some momentum going into the 70s, but really it started to take off in the early 2000s. That's when I think it's been rolled out on a very high-level commercial basis. And I think the biggest thing for it is it offers a lot of the energy companies are offering rebates that make it very affordable, or not very affordable, but make it more reasonable for projects to consider it and consider what the payback time is. But conceptually, the whole idea behind geothermal is that we're using the core temperature of the ground below us to provide both heating and cooling depending on what season it is. So if you think about digging down underground below frost depth, the ground temperature is fairly consistent in areas, and here we would expect anywhere from 50 to 55 degrees. So what that means is that in the coldest winter days, we still have that very consistent temperature underground. And we've got this elaborate piping system that we'll talk about that runs water through a system that either warms up or cools down depending on what's going on outside. Okay, so it gets us to this bench line 55 degrees, and then we use electric heat pumps to kind of tailor that temperature when it comes into the building to make it exactly what people want at their specific thermostat. But the majority of the work is being done by that core temperature of the earth itself. So you do see this a lot in Europe, a lot in Iceland with all the volcanic activity, but it's something that we are seeing more and more of these days, especially with these energy rebates. A couple other things about our system in particular at kind of a high level. The temperature transfer happens through water. So this is what we would consider a closed loop system, which means there's piping, and there's these pipes that go down 500, 600, 700 feet down into the earth. And there's a whole array of those systems. Those come into the building, and there's water constantly circulating through with pumps, okay? And there's no glycol like you would have in some systems. This one is all water-based, so we don't have to worry about any problems, leaking-wise. But like I said, it is a closed system. So you put the water in at the beginning, and that's constantly circulating until, for whatever reason, you need to purge the system however many years down the road. And like I mentioned, in the last bullet point here, we use water source heat pumps and electricity to achieve that final temperature inside the buildings. So that sustainability aspect is we're not using fossil fuels. We're not relying on natural gas or oil for the main energy sources for the building. We're relying on geothermal, and then we're using electricity to basically get to that temperature that we want. Okay. Any questions so far that may have brought up before we move on to the next slide? Yes, we'll start here. You put your hand first.
It doesn't generate electricity itself. It's not like a mill.
That's correct. Yep, it does not. The geothermal system itself does not conduct or generate electricity. We're taking electricity from the grid, right? And we'll, whether it's from the grid or the photovoltaic solar panels, that's what gets used to, to find that perfect temperature. Yeah. Yes.
Microphone's here, Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In case of electricity outages, What will happen then? Will the buildings be around 50 degrees in the winter, or
Great question.
how do we deal with that?
Yes. Thankfully, we don't have to rely on winter jackets. We are designing a full generator backup for this building, similar to what's on this campus right now. So, you know, if we're not relying on propane or other fuel sources, you know, that generator would be there for a certain number of days to sustain and keep that geothermal system running using the electricity from it. So we lose power or for some reason don't have natural gas. Now, we will not be relying on natural gas with the exception of a few kind of small locations in the apartment building, but this will be all electric. Yeah. Yes.
I'm just wondering if the recent evidence of climate change, i.e. heating, would affect something like this, or is it too soon to tell? Perhaps...
Do you mean like the ground temperatures and if those would fluctuate?
No, I mean, you mentioned that the temperature so many feet down is remarkably consistent throughout the year. So what I'm asking is there any reason to believe that the warming being caused by climate change would affect the system over time, or is it too soon to tell?
From my level of understanding, I think it's too soon to tell. Certainly I can talk to the engineers to see if they have any white papers or information that might provide some additional answers there. You know, I think climate change obviously impacts all sorts of areas, you know, electric costs. So with something like this doing 90% of the work, then we're only relying on 10% electricity. So that's kind of how it helps from that perspective, but that's only one sliver of it.
Thank you.
Yep, you got it. Maybe got one more back here.
Sorry.
What about the water level? How far down do you have to go to, I mean, just the water that you're using? This is groundwater, right?
Great question. So the water that gets put into, and actually let me just jump to the next slide because there's a nice graphic. Oh, maybe not that one. We'll come back to this one. Hold on. Sorry, I thought I had this one blown up. Okay, so if you just look at this image here on the bottom left, all the water that's running through those pipes, that's water that we are putting into the system, and then it's closed off and it's a closed loop. We're not relying on groundwater for inside the pipes, but the one way that groundwater would come in to impact this in a very positive way is that if in the testing that's ongoing today, if we identify aquifers that are underwater, that's even better because that's giving even, you know, better temperatures, more consistent hitting on those pipes. So, you know, that you could go from a system that completely relies on just the ground temperature to an aquifer, and that could just, you know, give us, you know, maybe 25% more yield on the system than we would have expected otherwise. But the water in the system itself is all domestic water that we've put into it.
So this is regular water that we get from, you know, Metropolitan?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay,
I am going to ask people to use the mic only because we're filming this so that we can show it at a later date if anybody missed it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the process that we're doing right now in pre-construction for both planning, but investigations of, you know, what yield we can get with the geothermal system. So right now, as I'm sure many of you have noticed over on the expansion site, there is a pipe sticking out a couple feet out of the ground. A couple weeks ago, that was drilled down 500 feet, and what we're running is we're running tests to understand what are the actual ground temperatures. Did we hit any aquifers? Did we hit any voids underground that are just air voids that are, you know, those are negative to the system. Those don't help, so you try not to hit them. And from what I've been told during the drilling, they did not run into any of that, so that's great. But we're going through a process of, it was supposed to start last week. It's a 48-hour long test where they run water through the system, understand the yield, and then that gets turned over into a report provided to our engineering team. and they use that data to design the overall system. So not too long ago, geothermal systems kind of started to have a little bit of a bad rap when it came to just, yep, let's just go in and put a bunch of wells and cross our fingers that it's going to work the way we're hoping it will. There wasn't as much of this testing done, 15, 20 years ago and beyond. So that's one of the reasons this is really starting to take off these days, is that you can get much more accurate information and work with it that way, so that we have a very tailored system for this site. Yes, sir.
So your graphic is showing these very narrow loops, and I take it that the downflow and the upflow are running in the same well?
I believe they are, yes.
Otherwise, you'd have to send somebody 500 feet underground to connect them.
Right.
So how does that work out with the, warm and cool running right next to one another?
That's a question I'm going to have to follow up and get some more information on. But I do know that they just drilled the one hole out there, and they do have the loop, so it's large enough that you do get both directions of water flow.
Okay, and then the second question is, are there any thermal storage devices in this system? Right, so.
Yeah, so as far as thermal storage goes, the water is on a constant loop. So that's coming in. There are energy recovery systems in the building that I know for a fact for air recovery, so with ventilation ducts that are going out, recovering some of that heat to pull back into the building. I'm not sure about the geothermal system, what energy recovery there is there, but I'll certainly find out.
So there isn't a big tank of warm water somewhere?
Not that I understand, no.
Okay, thanks.
No, yep. Okay. So if you had noticed, or if you drove by the day that the drill was happening, you would have seen a rig similar to this one here on the left. Same graphic we looked at on the right. And then I believe there is or was a trailer out recently, and that was getting some of that testing started. So these are just activities that you'll see out there as we get that testing data and get that over to the engineers. Okay. Okay, so a couple of graphics on the screen here. On the right side, this is a kind of a diagram that starts to show this loop of water, right? So on the left, you can see, let me see if I can actually get the pointer. There we go. Okay. So this portion of the graphic represents the well field itself, okay? So water goes up and down each one of those wells, down 500 feet or however deep they determine the rest of the wells need to go. It recirculates through this piping. There are booster pumps to keep that water moving at a certain speed. And then they're introduced into the water source heat pumps in the building. So there will be multiple water source heat pumps throughout the apartment building for each apartment, for each zone inside the common area, so that not everybody in the entire building is relying on it being one temperature. Everybody can have individual controls, similar to what you have right now. But it's all relying on that same 50 to 55 degree temperature to start with. Another thing that I'll mention about the geothermal system, so I talked about the incentives quite a bit. The average payback, if you don't include incentives that are available, has usually been about 15 to 20 years. That makes it difficult for projects to take that cost and handle all that upfront cost, because you have to go out for construction financing, deal with other financial metrics. With the work that Eversource has done and the incentives that they put out there, they're paying for just over half of the system, and those are rebates that are going to come back to Doncaster as soon as within 90 days of construction completion. So there's an agreement that we've already executed with Eversource saying we're moving in this direction. We're going through the design process with them right now. They're going to review and approve the final construction documents that they're in line with, what the rebates are per well that gets drilled. And then they'll come back out and commission the system at the end of construction. They'll say, yep, you installed everything you said you were going to. In 90 days, you'll get a check from us, and we're talking about some pretty serious money. So that will take that payback period from 15 years down to about 8 or 9 years. So that's the investment the leadership team has decided to make. Yes?
Rob, is Eversource taking advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act and they sort of flow that through to you, or does Doncaster apply for all?
Great question. So the Inflation Reduction Act, that is a separate component that we are tracking as well. It's challenging because unlike Eversource, you can't sign up at this point of design and be guaranteed that you're going to get the money down the road.
It's put into service first or something.
Yeah, there's a very specific criteria. You have to be further in design than we are right now and get into construction, apply for the money. So our team is tracking those funds, and we want to make sure that if they are still available when the time is right, we will apply for them. But as far as the project in Doncaster relying on the money coming back, that's just on the Eversource side. Anything with the Inflation Reduction Act would just be extra and make the project even more, yield more.
We hope for the best.
Absolutely.
Get better, not worse.
Yep. Plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Why did Eversource do that?
So they're trying to incentivize everybody to go full electric. So one of the base requirements is that the primary heating and cooling for the building needs to be electric driven. So we couldn't have boilers inside the building that are gas fired. They have to be electric. So, they're looking into the future, putting all these out there. There's also, they work with the government, making them the finances available, but we've seen it work very successful on other projects. We've gone through and signed those agreements. So it's a pretty amazing thing they're doing. I mean, we're talking about over $500,000 that will be coming back. So, yeah. Great. Let me just look at my notes here. Oh, the other major benefit for the geothermal system. So if we didn't have geothermal and we were going at this like you do many, large apartment buildings, we would have heat pumps all over the place. And we will have heat pumps for the cottages, and we're looking at potential opportunities to do geothermal for the cottages, but the emphasis is on the apartment building with the money that's been guaranteed. But heat pumps, traditionally, you need to replace those every 10 years or so. This system, that does still rely on water source heat pumps, those heat pumps are going to last longer, but the wells themselves, they will warranty them for upwards of 50 years, but the lifespans that they're seeing of these wells go well beyond that. So we're talking about a very, a big investment up front, but a very long lifespan for these systems. So a huge benefit for the Doncaster team. Yep. Okay, so that's kind of a high-level overview of how we're working through geothermal right now. Like I said, there's a lot more that's going to be happening over the next several months as we continue to work through the design process, get back the test data, and then see what that will yield. But, what that will mainly guide us in is it will say, okay, we've already dug one well. What we learned from that well is that we need to go a little bit deeper, or, we need to have X number of wells on the site, and then we get rebates based on how many wells we drill. So lots of information will be coming back, and we'll get to make those final decisions. Okay, so the next topic that I would like to talk about, and this is one that should be fairly familiar to folks because you do have these already on the pool roof, but the photovoltaic panels. So another component of sustainability on the project is that on the apartment building, on the exposures of the roof that are going to work, we are planning to put photovoltaic cells, and those will be part of getting the electricity that's going to run those geothermal pumps as well as other aspects of the project. Okay. There are provisions that will be going into the cottages as well. There will not be solar panels from day one, but there will be certain infrastructure built into those cottages so that they could be added without, a significant amount of work, and that's just a base level of code requirement at this point.
What is the plan for any excess electricity that's generated through those panels? Do they go back into the grid, or will we have a battery storage area?
So I think with the size that we're looking at, just based on the amount of sloped roof that we have on this building that will yield it, I don't think we're going to have an excess. I think, we're going to be in a situation where we're constantly using that electricity for the apartment building, and we won't be dumping anything back out to the grid. If we had an all-electric building that was completely reliant on solar panels, then we would have a battery system as a backup, but that's not part of this system. We will have generator backup, but that's not tied to the panels. But as far as the technology is concerned, it's very similar to what you see on the pool roof today and how it will tie into the system. So just kind of carrying that forward into the next phase of Doncaster. So I do want to touch on other components just in general on sustainability, so things that are going into the building design, as well as in the next slide we'll talk about some site design elements. You can see the bullets on the left here, but there's a huge emphasis on insulation values. So the energy code does require a base level, and every 3 years a new energy code comes out and those levels continue to increase. So even if your base level energy code, it's a very well-performing building. It has to be very airtight and a lot of insulation. But we do push to get to always exceed those insulation values so that we're always looking at the future as far as saving the amount of energy that goes into the building. There are a couple of just details off to the right that I just clipped, but these are various parts of the building. There's an emphasis on the amount of insulation, but also the type of insulation that's being used in various areas. So we will have various locations of R21 craft face bat insulation on the inside of exterior walls, but then we go and we have additional rigid insulation on the exterior. So the buildings will be very airtight. There's a lot of details that CE Floyd will be coordinating with the design team so that all the wall intersections, so we have an interior wall that intersects an exterior wall, we don't have air leakage going out, so that when we do our blower door tests, we're meeting all of the requirements that were set up early on in the project. Okay. All of the exterior windows and doors, they're going to include glazing that's both argon filled and low E coatings. So it's all double pane glass, very energy efficient. And then we can study if there are opportunities to go beyond that. We will have all LED lighting throughout the campus, interior and exterior. So obviously that's great for energy, low flow plumbing fixtures. And then I did mention the heat recovery units that are up on the rooftop. So a lot of the heat that you gain from whether it's over a residential stove or if it's in a bathroom, a ceiling fan, all that heat that comes out that normally just goes right outside of the building, those will go through these energy recovery systems that will pull that heat into the air that's being pulled into the building so that we're not taking outdoor temperature and raising it all the way to where we want it on the inside, but we're capturing some of that heat, not losing it all to the exterior.
So how do you plan to deal with condensation and mold?
Yeah, that's one of the big topics and one of the things that the architectural team, the engineers work very hard at. So, whether it's the kind of ductwork that's going to be used for these systems, the locations, how that works with the exterior envelope. We've, had a lot of issues, back in the early 2000s as people were starting to really make these buildings tighter and tighter because you didn't allow the buildings to breathe as much. And now with the emphasis on sustainability, you do see much more, I'd say, sustainable construction practices that help with that. But the architect does work with an energy consultant. They look at where the dew point is in the walls, the floors, the roofs, and they make sure that they've got the adequate materials so that you're not having condensation on a window or on the inside of a wall. So lots of factors that get worked in there. Okay. Let's not reboot. There we go. Okay. And then the last piece of this that we will discuss has more to do with the site design. So if any of you listened in to the public hearings that we had recently, you'll recognize some of these images, but Fuss & O'Neill is leading the charge on that work, and they spent a lot of time evaluating the existing farmland site, how that works environmentally, and what can we do with sustainable practices to make sure that all the water runoff is treated and is going to be making it better than it is today. So the existing site, lacks sediment and erosion controls, contains invasive plant species along the edge of the wetlands, and all the farming chemicals that are used out there do drain down towards the wetlands. So when we do get a lot of neighbors come out pushing back, we really try to emphasize this as a point. Look, the water that runs off across that farmland right now is going in the direction of these wetlands. A lot of them are talking about the wells that they have on their sites. So, that should be a pretty significant concern. But thankfully, with a lot of various methods and what the engineering team calls LID, so low impact design features. They're using various things around the site, and there's a graphic. Let me zoom in here. This graphic down in the bottom left. This shows a couple different areas, and these have to do with those LIDs that I mentioned. So oftentimes, you'll see in developments this big pond, right, that's right out in the middle. Sometimes they can look okay, sometimes they fully drain, sometimes they don't. But here we're trying to go at it in a variety of ways. So the green sections that you can see, these are intended to be rain gardens. So those will have various materials and that will allow water to go down into the ground and dissipate naturally, so that we don't have as much impervious material. But those do calculate towards what the stormwater calculations are. And the extensive ponds that we're going to have, those are the blue areas to the back, and those will kind of line the wetlands. So that's kind of the last line of defense of, okay, we've hit a 100-year storm. We have all this water that's generated up in these ponds. They've then taken a, let's say, a percentage of design, and they've exceeded that, so that any water above those storms will go through an additional filtering system before it then drains off into the wetland. So all that water that's run off across driveways, grass, the tops of building, it's all collected in a very sustainable manner, treated before it goes into the wetlands, unlike it does today. Yes?
Does your landscape team, it sounds like you're focused on farming pesticides, chemicals that are currently in the cornfield. But are you guys also working on what kind of chemicals or not takes to sustain it over a long period? And is that, if you're giving advice, is it going to apply to the legacy? I mean, in other words, switching to non-pesticide plant materials.
Yep. So that's a great question, and that has certainly come up. There's a strong emphasis with our landscape designers to find, locally sourced, regional plantings that, aren't things that we're bringing in from the other side of the country that rely on heavy chemicals to make sure that they live and look beautiful. We're relying on things that can live here naturally. They'll cut back on the invasives that are out there. That same question did come up during the wetlands hearing, and Kelly was very strong in responding to it as far as, yes, Doncaster takes that very seriously with the chemicals that are used today and will certainly be accounted for. I think it was discussed regarding the trail that goes through the wetlands and just how weeds and whatnot are treated through there. So I know that is an emphasis for the facilities team, as well as the leadership team. So that is what I've got to present today. Went through site design, building design, geothermal, so lots of various aspects of sustainability throughout the project. So we're going to continue developing these plans. We're going to be back in front of the planning board on May 23rd. We're hoping that's going to be the last public hearing. We'll get feedback from the commissioners and move this into the next phase so we can finalize drawings, really get this out onto the market, work with all those depositors that have already started to put money down and take it to the next level. So, we're at an exciting turning point for the project, get through these approvals and start getting some construction documents pulled together so we can start construction, in a matter of, right now we're targeting, I think the notice to proceed, if everything continues on track, end of this year, if not very early 2025. So, great. Yes?
How much of the things that you're putting in the new buildings can be incorporated in the expansion here, in this building?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of the landscape practices that I discussed, so areas that are being developed out in front of the pool where we're expanding out, those same practices will be used here. Some parking areas that are getting expanded, those are going to have similar types of drainage systems that treat that water before it runs off into the wetlands. As far as geothermal goes, geothermal is a focus on the expansion site. I had alluded to the cottages, and we've certainly looked into it. We're actually getting a price to incorporate it into the cottages, but unfortunately, Eversource does not provide the same level of incentives for residential use as they do for commercial large systems. So it is something that we're going to evaluate, but it might be cost prohibitive, but we're going to continue working through that. But there won't be an opportunity, given the distance between the well field that we'll have at the expansion site, to expand it this way. Yep. Any other? Go.
After this is in and running for a number of years, who does the maintenance and repair?
So for the geothermal system specifically, or yes? So through construction and right after construction, there will be a period of warranties, with the manufacturer, with the installer, really focus in on that first year to make sure everything is running appropriately. And then there will be a follow-up and a warranty system that the facilities team will be running moving out of that 1 year period. Now, they will be able to rely on the construction team to come in and help out when there are things that they need to bring in the right specialists. But after we get out of that window of 1 year past construction, it does become a maintenance item for the team here. Yeah, and that's generally the case for most construction projects. So, yeah.
Is there enough history and experience with the plumbing itself that goes down into those 500-foot wells to know their lifetime? Do they rust? Do they?
Yep. So my understanding is that the pipes that are going down there, I believe they are CPVC piping that goes down. So we're not going to be dealing with rusting pipes. The connections are geared towards this sort of system. One thing that we are talking about is beyond just what the town requires for Doncaster to feel good about this, do we look at any additional third-party inspection testing so that when that system is being installed, we do have a third-party set of eyes looking at those connections. It's probably not something where it's every single one, but it's something that at the beginning, this testing group, or not testing, but this inspection group is out there to make sure things are being done appropriately, and then they'll come back and check it throughout the way. So certainly, that's a significant part of this, is making sure everything gets installed appropriately. We'll have a commissioning agent for various parts of the project, and then there are other third parties that the town will require as well. Yeah. Yes?
And this isn't geothermal or anything, but is your work connected? I'm thinking about kitchen composting and whether the kitchens in the new build and in the renovation are going to be state-of-the-art, sustainable, stuff like that. Is that part of your focus? Or?
Well, so I guess there's two things. So we will have residential kitchens like you have here in every apartment and every cottage. All the appliances that are being looked at are higher-end appliances, Energy Star rated, but like GE profile level appliances that you would see. Within the kitchens themselves, everything will, especially at the expansion, everything will be state-of-the-art, brand new, very, very highly energy efficient. As far as the work that's going to be done here on the Legacy campus, they're not going in and replacing all the equipment in the existing kitchen. That's just not something that can be done at this point. However, we are going to be strategically implementing new pieces of equipment, new cooking lines that will replace some existing equipment and really emphasize the efficiency of how that kitchen works. So some equipment gets replaced, there will be lots of new equipment, but they're not going in and doing a complete overhaul of everything.
I was particularly interested in waste management because Heather tells us that's really a big problem.
Yes, and do you mind if I
Sure,
jump
go ahead.
in? I'm just going to go up here only because we're filming it for the TV.
Please.
I'm going to take over, Rob. We are looking at a piece of equipment called an Orca. So if you want to look that up, it essentially is in the utility or dish room area, and scraps will go into that, and then it actually comes into a liquid and then goes into the grease traps. So that's something in the capital budget this year. We do have a redo of our utility dish room area that's been, I think it's been up for 25 or 30 years. So we did get that priced out for the dish room, and we are looking at that with our Scopos partners.
Yep.
in the new kitchen.
You get two. I mean, if it is Orca, you put one in here and one up there.
Yeah, I mean that's one brand that does similar things, but you would only need them in each kitchen. So it's in the utility area.
Right.
Yep, and so we are looking at that strongly. Yes.
So what kind of scraps will the Orca take? Our previous system, which I know had its problems with odors and such, would take dairy and bones.
It takes all of the organic materials, not necessarily, sometimes when you're composting, you also put in paper and different things like that. This is all just the organic materials. It can take all of that. Yep.
What accommodation is planned for electric vehicles?
Great question. So there, I believe, and I'm going to have to go back and double check, but in phase 1, I believe the intent is to have 4 public or, available to Doncaster residents and staff in front of the apartment building. And then in phase 2, there'll be additional ones. We're also putting in the infrastructure to make sure that in the cottage garages, as well as the 15 garages that will be in the apartment building, that we will have that hookup available. So whether it's a phase 1 or a level 1 or a level 2 charger in the garages, I'm not sure which one that will be, but in the front of the building, those will be level 2 chargers so that somebody could come up, from this side and charge over there and vice versa. Yeah. Which I will appreciate because I recently got an electric car and I just stayed at a hotel last night that finally has a plug-in, which is very nice. Any other questions?
Is that for the other campus or this?
That is for the other campus. I'll need to look. I don't remember. I don't want to say there is not or there is on the Legacy campus, but I'm specifically remembering the expansion one, so I'll follow up on that.
So just a comment on that. Ross says.
Wait for the.
So Ross says that approximately July of this year, 2 level 2 chargers will be put in down near the Prospect carports.
Great. Oh, I just overheard a question. Let me address it because it's a very good question. I won't point you out even though I just did.
Okay.
So level 1, level 2, level 3 charging. I don't want to get this backwards, so somebody correct me if I do, but I believe level 1 is, hey, I've got a residential plug in my garage. I plug into that and it takes, so my car is it's a hybrid plug-in, so it takes both gas and electricity. If I plug it in, I get 30 miles to drive on the electric battery. At my house, that takes 8 hours because I only have a level 1 charger. If I had a level 2 charger, it would take about 2 hours, which is what it took last night at my hotel. And then a level 3 is like the Tesla superchargers that you'll see out at grocery stores on the highway. Those will fill you up in 15, 20 minutes. So, and those, obviously, the higher you get, the more electricity, demand there is. So, yeah. Any other general questions? Yes, sir. She'll bring that up too.
Office buildings in this area that have geothermal systems up and running?
I don't know about office buildings in particular, but I do know. Yeah. I'm forgetting what the name of it was, but when we were starting to do the planning to go to drill the well, we did want to get some information over to our engineers just for basic pricing assumptions in the last design phase. So the Connecticut Wells is the group that dug that well, and we did ask them for, hey, can you give us anything within a 5-10 mile radius, just data that we can use just to use as a placeholder. They were able to provide that, I think a couple of projects. I just don't know which ones they specifically were. But there were plenty in this area that they were able to share.
Seabury?
I feel like I've heard Mark say that Seabury does have it.
Yeah, 3.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Yes?
Can you just leave that up so we can look at it?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to. It does keep popping up that it wants to reboot though, so that may happen, but happy to leave it up.
Is there a paper copy of this?
I have this the slide deck so I could do that?
Maybe put it out in
Yep.
front of the...
Yeah, absolutely. And we did film this, and we're thinking of, you know, making sure that we can replay it for anyone that didn't get to see it live.
Great. Yes?
Wore good shoes today.
A question about the geothermal systems and the piping. Are tree roots a problem for the pipes?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, the drilling rigs that they use are pretty substantial, so I've got to imagine that if they did find something, you know, they would be able to overcome
Or
it.
do they not plant trees near a field? like
Right, so a lot of this does also, a lot of the field, like we could end up having 40 to 50 wells at the end of the day. And a lot of those, and this is very traditional practice, will be under paved areas. So in 50, 75 years, there will need to be work. I mean, you'll be repaving multiple times before then. But those wells, even if it was not in the middle of a field, we would be, you wouldn't see all the pipes sticking up. They would be under a couple feet of ground, and you wouldn't see it anyways, so, yeah. Great, well, thank you very much. You know, I'm happy to hang around if there are any other questions, but we'll leave this up on the screen. Great, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, is it okay? Do you mind if I share?
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's very, very generic.
All right, I'm gonna go
Hello.
stop the...
Oh, you're very welcome.
I'm aware of one department in this building
Okay.
that has never had a problem.
Oh, did I survive?
Okay. Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
You tried hard.
You did try.
I'm assuming that that's been raised with facilities. Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah.
I just wonder, now that we're trying so carefully to be energy efficient.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's a challenge on large campuses because you do have, you know, buildings of all various ages, and you know, I've got another project that we're working on, a small addition. So if you imagine each of the apartment wings, if you were adding a small addition just to get another 10 apartments, but then it's like how much do those renovations extend into the building? Everything's kind of finance capped, but. So, you know, and one of the other things that, you know, Ross and Rob are working on is that they are getting an updated evaluation of the entire campus. So there's a company called Simple, and they provide a report. They go